So thank you everyone for joining us. This is Natasha Telger with Illinois WorkNet and with Aaron Hacker.
Hello, good afternoon.
And so if you haven't had a chance to go ahead and check in, I'll go ahead and start my screen sharing today. We are going to take a look at some tools today. Well, first of all, if you have any questions that you've had on your mind or you need some help with something, go ahead and enter those into the chat pod, and then we can go in and look at those items once once we go through the screen sharing.
And I'll do my best to answer some of those questions on the side if I can, if they are program-related questions. If they're technical questions, I might wait until Natasha's got a moment to answer them. But if there's some I can answer, I'll see what I can do.
Okay, great. And then I'll go ahead, if you didn't get a chance to check in, we'll open that up at the end as well. Okay, so what I wanted to show you today is the worksite placement. And so Cody just released that today to test. So you're seeing it just about the same time that I am. So we will be going through and testing the worksite placement, and so hopefully we'll be able to have it out to you on Monday. That's the goal. So I want to make sure that you log into your tools just like you would any other time. You go to the partner guide, the Community Employment Partner Guide, click on the partner tools, and then you'll end up with going to one of your customer groups, your Community Youth Employment customer group. So just like you normally would. And so when you get into the tools, along the top menu you'll see dashboards, groups, provider info, and then this little icon. So as we add more and more information up here, then you'll notice that some of these things are going to start moving to icons. Like this is, you can see we have a little sandwich or hamburger, whatever people call it for the menu item. And then you can see that as on smaller devices, it's just going to use these icons. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of what these little icons mean. Whenever you hover over them, then they'll give you some alt text so you can see them. But our system does use responsive design. So if you notice that sometimes when you have a big screen, you can see all the words, and when your screen gets smaller, and all of a sudden all you see are icons, don't worry. That's the way it's supposed to work. So along the top, we have dashboards, groups, your provider information, and this little icon is the worksite placement. So when I go to worksite placement, if you have multiple projects, then you'll see those multiple projects here. I did do a little testing, and Cody needs to make an update in the CYP area. So today, I know we're in Community Youth Employment Program, but I'm going to have to select Youth Apprenticeship for the moment, just so that I can kind of show you how this works. So when you go to your worksite placement page, you're going to select your program, you're going to select CYP. Your agency should default to what you have. If you have access to multiples, you'll see the multiple agencies. And if you have other information entered in the system, then for CYP, you're going to want permanent employment. When you first come to this page, you're not going to have anything here because we're just now releasing it for Community Youth Employment Program. So what you're going to do is you are going to click on Add Employer and Worksite. If you already have employers in the system, then you can just select from that listing of employers, or if you need to add an employer, you can add an employer. So let's just put builder, and then you can put in a website, you want their contact information. You want the address information, the city, state, zip code, and then the primary contact. And then the phone number. And you have the option right on this page to go ahead and say, is this employer the worksite? But if I just breeze right on past that because I'm really into entering the employer information and I just glossed over it, didn't see it, not a problem. I'm just going to go ahead and I can either select a worksite that I already have listed, or I can add a new worksite, and I can go ahead and say, oh, this worksite really is the same as the employer. So I haven't missed my opportunity. I can do that little checkbox, and it's going to use the employer information to populate the fields. And Cody is going to make this so that it does populate with the existing contact information that was from the employer. So you can either keep that or add a different person. So I add that information. Working here. And then I'm going to enter the placement information. So we use SOC codes so that you can, so that we can easily run reports on the different types of occupations. So you can either do a search by entering in the information like maybe it's, I don't know, chef or something like that if I wanted to narrow down my search field. Or I can just do a blind search and hit select. And I have my SOC code that's populated. If I wanted to change this to chef helper, it will let me because there are often times that employers have job titles that don't really match up exactly with the SOC code. And we understand that, so that's why we go ahead and give you the option to update that title. You can put in the job description. And then you can, for this program, you're going to select permanent employment. And so make sure for Cody, whenever he's making updates for the CYP section, that permanent employment is going to be the option that is available for this particular program. We do ask that you put the minimum wage in, and we know that minimum wage can be different across the state and for your different regions. So we do ask that at this level, we include the minimum wage, and that's in the...
I want to point out, Natasha, I'm sorry that I just wanted to point out, we've had lots of discussions about the applicable minimum wage and what that means, and it is as Natasha says. I know we've got differences from location to location, and depends on age and the type of employment, whether it's tipped employment, whether it's temporary employment. For CYEP, in most circumstances, during the first 90 days, the minimum wage, the applicable minimum wage, is going to be $7.75 an hour, which, of course, I know we've had lots of discussions about, is less than the normal $8.25 an hour state minimum wage. It's less than most of the Chicago and Cook County minimum wages. But to be clear, I'll refer you to the statutes that are relevant here, and I've tried to do this pretty consistently, but individuals during their first 90 days of employment unless there is a local minimum wage that supersedes this regulation, individuals during their first 90 days of employment, the applicable minimum wage is a 50-cent differential below the regular state minimum wage. So I'll direct the reference there on the left, but just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, thank you. And then we do have minimum wage there. And Erin, correct me if I say this incorrectly. It's important to have the minimum wage there because we have to make sure that the combination of the subsidized and the unsubsidized meets at least the minimum wage.
That is correct. And so what it is that the youth may not be paid less than the applicable minimum wage, meaning that if the applicable minimum wage is $7.75 an hour, the youth cannot earn less than that. So if you put that the youth's wage is $5 an hour, that's going to be a red flag for us. We're going to say you can't do that. Now, if the youth is a tipped employee or something like that, the minimum wages are different, and there are some different requirements that we can look at. But in a lot of cases, the reason we ask is because we have to ensure that the youth does not earn less than the minimum wage. And Natasha is right that that's a combination of all of the wage funding sources. So, for example, if the youth is 100% subsidized for 90 days, 3 months, or if the youth is partially subsidized, or if the youth is unsubsidized, in any of those cases, the youth cannot earn less than the hourly minimum wage. Our other requirement is that the youth subsidized portion cannot be more than the applicable minimum wage. So the part that you pay from the grant to the youth cannot be more than that minimum wage. The youth can earn more than that minimum wage. The youth could earn more as a combination of subsidized and unsubsidized portions. So the whole reason that we enter that applicable minimum wage is to ensure that the youth is not paid less than what is legally allowed, and that you are not giving a subsidy more than what the program allows.
Great. Okay, so that's the backstory of why we ask for minimum wage right here. And then the next area is the hourly wage. So, and said, you can give them more than that, but if it's above and beyond whatever that the extra income would have to be unsubsidized wages. And then you can put the number of openings. Maybe this employer has 2 openings. And then you can put, the applicable start and end dates. This is really an area that, we wanted to, they're kind of like placeholders. So in the future, with these types of programs, you can show, when it's kind of like a job posting. When is the job available? So if the job's not opening up for 30 days, then you could put the start date out 30 days out. Right now, we don't really have any extra functionality built in with that, but that's why we have put those starting display date and start ending date. Okay. So now you have added your work site. Let me narrow down the one that I just added, filter that down. And I'm trying to remember which one I just added. Must be this one. Okay, so I can see my employer, I can see my work site, I can see my job, and I can see the number of openings that I have. If I click on employer, it's going to open up the employer information, and I can edit it. If I open up the worksite, it's going to open up the worksite information. If I open up the job, it's going to open up the job information. We did go ahead and add a link here. So if you just so that it's more intuitive. So if you needed to update the job opening to increase or decrease the number of projected openings, you could just easily do that. Okay, so here's your display again. You can see, well, now let me filter. It didn't keep the filter on there for me. Okay, so this was my line item. You can see it was 2, and I just updated it to 3. When I want to add a customer, I simply select Add a Customer, and it's going to pull from a listing of my customers. I just click Add. You can see we have the first name, last name already populated. You can see my hourly wage is $11. If I say that the subsidized wage is $6, then it will automatically calculate my unsubsidized wage. So there, and it's going to tell me that my unsubsidized wage. So anyway, we did that so that you can easily update the information and make sure that the hourly wage always equals the subsidized plus the unsubsidized.
That kind of answers Keisha's question there, too. You know, Keisha asks, so if we're totally subsidizing in the first 90 days, would we enter $7.75 in both fields for wage? Yes, you would if you are 100% subsidizing, because you cannot subsidize more than the applicable minimum wage. And if the applicable minimum wage is $7.75 an hour, or I think, Nana, you said maybe $7.25, it would be $7.75 an hour. But so yes, if you are totally 100% subsidizing that wage, then the most the youth is going to get is $7.75. So both the hourly wage and the minimum wage would be $7.75. You can go in there and indicate, you know, that the hourly portion of subsidized is $7.75 an hour, and the unsubsidized portion would be 0. Now, Natasha, correct me if I'm wrong, but later, if the youth placement, you know, the youth it goes from being a subsidized employee to an unsubsidized employee and has exceeded the 90 days. Now the applicable minimum wage would be different if the youth is over the age of 18. And so, for example, if the youth is over the age of 18 and the youth is outside of their first 90 days of employment, the applicable minimum wage would go up to whatever the, you know, if you were in Chicago, whatever the Chicago minimum wage is. If there wasn't a local minimum wage, it would be the state minimum wage of $8.25 an hour. So, Natasha, is there an opportunity then to change both the minimum wage of the position, the placement there, as well as the wage being paid, you know, whether it's the portion of subsidized, the ratio of subsidized to unsubsidized, et cetera?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we just need to move the minimum wage rate from the job. I just noticed that these aren't populating, but I'm just wondering if we need to move this minimum wage rate to this level instead of the, you know, are there benefits to having it at the job title level versus the individual level?
Well, the issue is, and I think maybe we do need to move it, only because the minimum wage is going to be very, very individualized. A lot depends on the age and the location of the youth. If youth are under the age of 18, they can be paid $7.75 indefinitely until they are over the age of 18. If the youth are over the age of 18, they can be paid $7.75 an hour during their first 90 days of employment. So it's going to vary a lot depending on the circumstance of the individual youth.
Okay. Well, we'll just move it to the individual level, and that should take care of a lot of that.
Yeah, sorry about that confusion.
No, not a problem. And then, okay, so then as a side note, do we, well, I'll just leave it there. We'll go with that for now. So we'll move the minimum wage rate to the customer level. And then we'll go ahead and you can select full-time or part-time.
Natasha, you can see too, Jay was asking about changing that in the future too. So if that job placement changes from part-time to full-time, that's something that can go in and be edited at the individual level.
Yes. Yep. And we can change this to, maybe it's more of a planned date. They're starting in a week or two. Or, nope, they've started yesterday or they're starting today. Okay, so whenever you choose your status, whatever day you choose, so if this person started 2 days ago, and I can backdate it, for when they started, just know that their time allotted for the subsidized wage, the 90 days, starts ticking from the point of this first start date. If, for whatever reason, it's beyond the control of anyone else, and they have to be put on hold, and I don't know, Erin, you might want to give some examples of why you would put somebody on hold.
The idea would be if something came up and, I realize probably within the first 90 days of employment, it is unlikely that, that the employer is going to be giving leaves of absence, but it's possible. So let's say somebody was hired and they happen to be 6 months pregnant, and 2 months into their placement, they go into early labor, and now, if we started the clock on those unsubsidized wages, now the youth wouldn't be able to reap the benefit of the third month of subsidized wages. So we want the opportunity to kind of pause that clock if something happens, or if there's an unexpected medical emergency where somebody's been in a car accident, or there's a death in the family and somebody has to take some time off to deal with that. There are different things that might happen where the youth is still employed. The youth has a job and is expected, back on the job soon, but the youth is granted a leave of absence from the work and is not really earning any income. So in situations like that, we would want to change that status to on hold, because otherwise we want to make sure that we are capping that subsidy at 90 days, at 3 months. So because that's just the limit of our program. And so the WorkNet, I've asked Natasha to kind of build in some safeguards, some limits that will prevent you from subsidizing the wage of a youth participant for more than 90 days. Again, it'll be red flagged. But we don't want it to limit you if for some reason the youth didn't actually get to go to work during those entire 90 days. And I realize those circumstances are probably going to be rare, but it may happen.
Thanks. So the time starts ticking as soon as you click started. If you change them to hold, then the clock pauses until you change them back to started. So the only way you can pause that time period from continuing on is the on hold. Because even if you hit started and then maybe 2 weeks they were terminated, that clock is still ticking. Right, Erin?
Say that one more time.
Let's say that I have a person and I place them, and I start placing them today, so the time is still ticking. And let's say like 2 weeks from now, I don't know, maybe it's just not a good fit and it's just not going to work out. So I'm going to say, well, they've been terminated from this position, so it takes me 5 days to get them placed at a different employer.
Right. So then the clock
it
would not
doesn't,
start
yeah.
again until you enter a new placement. And again, the idea is we've got this subsidy limited to 90 days, and that's 90 days regardless of how many placements the youth needs. Well, and there's a reason for that. One of the main things that we're trying to avoid, we don't want people, mostly we don't want our employers to abuse the subsidy. We don't want people to hire someone for 3 months and then at the end of 3 months say, oh, no, I'm sorry, I can't keep this person anymore. And then, so then the youth goes and gets another job for 3 months, and then that employer does the same thing, and then the youth gets another job, et cetera, and it goes on and on. And we don't want that to happen. So, if the youth has worked in a position and, and the subsidy's exhausted, then we need to find the youth a job without the subsidy. So we want to make sure, though, that we're not burning that subsidy up. We tried to find, when do we actually count that the subsidy clock is ticking versus when it's not. So when the youth is actually employed and the youth is earning a subsidized wage, and maybe the youth is only working 1 day a week, but we're still counting the whole week as the youth is employed because the youth is regularly working. We're going to count up basically every day from the day that employment starts until the youth is either terminated or the youth is put on hold as far as the subsidy status and the youth's not earning any wages at the time, or if the youth is, if he reaches 90 days of subsidized employment. So those are the things like that. That's how we kind of, the logic behind how we counted the days of subsidy.
So you can go ahead and we'll go back and you'll say that this person has started, and then save. We don't need, oh, okay. So this is, Cody just put it out there, so let me see, I'll just try it again. Save. Nope, I get the big error message. But so basically, these are the fields. And then what I wanted to show you, but I can't do it right this moment, is when I hit save, you're going to have a history of your changes. So I know, like Jay has said, well, can we switch it from part-time to full-time employment? Most definitely. You can change these. You can change your subsidized wage from maybe you start out at, $4. Oh, wait a minute. I bet Cody made an update while we were in here. So anyway, we can go ahead and you can change you saw earlier how I was changing the different wages. So whenever you make those changes and you hit save, then it'll log that history of those changes. So you'll be able to see over time what changes were made and when they were made. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and go through. We've got a lot of testing to do because there's different, when things start and stop, and there's lots of pieces and parts to this. So I'd like to hopefully get it out to you Monday. And then right after this, once we get this out, we also have like a corresponding dashboard that goes along with the worksite placement. So you'll be able to see, where your employer status is, your customer status is, their status on their subsidized wages. You'll be able to see where they are with the follow-up. We'll be adding some more features down here so you can indicate, when you've completed the 30-day follow-up, and so forth. So those little other details will continue to be added. And let's see, Erin, looking back at some of these questions, are there other?
I think we've addressed most of the questions. There were some early on, again, still just some individuals having issue with the NOCD. It looked like Jay had a couple of issues where he had It
Yeah.
had been more than the 48 hours and still not seeing the scores. And I don't know if that still has to do with maybe people having multiple accounts. I think Emma, let's see.
Yeah, in those, I think we had an issue earlier today where some servers went down, and it was above and beyond only WorkNet control, outside of our control. And but we've had some issues lately related to those servers where things have been like a little bit slower. So I'm wondering if that's why it's timed out. But I know that they did get that obviously up and running, or I wouldn't be able to show you this. So, you can try it today or tomorrow, and then just let me know whenever that's happening so that, I can take a look at it, or somebody here can take a look at it, as soon as possible to see, if it's an my WorkNet issue or, I don't know, if it's a Nocti issue. At least we can address it right when it happens.
So I would say try to follow up. I don't know if it's helpful to you, Natasha. I often encourage people to send screenshots of what's going on. If they can send a specific image, if you don't know how to do that, you should be able to hit your print screen button on your keyboard, and then usually you can paste that image into a message and send it along. Is that at all helpful to you guys?
Most definitely.
Okay.
If we have a screen capture and like the username of the person that's logging in, I mean, a lot of times when you do a screen capture, you'll capture that up at the top right-hand corner, and then also what browser you're using. I will check on the thing with the 48 hours, but what happens if someone has a wrong name in their profile? So in the profile, we don't have that where the partners can update names and stuff like that, but your customer can log into their LMI WorkNet account and just log in. And in their dashboard, they can go to their profile. Also, while we're here and on the subject, we did update the customers dashboard this week, and so when you go to my dashboard, then you can see where it says update my profile. They can easily go in and update their information, but then they should be seen, and I'll need to double check this, but especially since we just released it, but any of their information that we're displaying to them, like their application, their community youth employment application, any of those type of things should show up in this section for their program application so they can view that information.
It looks like Jay had one other question down near the bottom. Sorry if I'm cutting you off, Natasha. But he says, for the Nocti, he says, I can see that a score is associated with the right individual, but the problem is it reads 0.
Yeah, I need to follow up with Cody on that, because I need to follow up with him on that and find out what's going on. I don't know what specifically, if there's, it's not everybody, so I just need to look at those specific individuals and find out what's going on. I don't know if it happened like in a time frame, a certain time span that something happened and so it's fixed, or if it's, it's not consistent. Let's just put it that way. It's not consistently not working.
Which is kind of unfortunate. If it's a consistent problem, it's easier to diagnose the problem, but it can be kind of tricky if it's an intermittent glitch.
Yeah, so we just need to kind of look at that a little bit closer and see what the common, what's the common theme, what are the common pieces and parts. We can narrow that down. So I do apologize. I will talk to my programmers immediately after our webinar. Hi. Alrighty. Any other questions? Oh, I just want to do real quick while I'm here. I don't know if you guys were on the webinar the other day, but you can see too that the customers can view their assessment areas, and like you're saying, like the NOCD, they could see their employment 101. So they have a view similar to yours. It's just that, you know, when it comes to like observational evaluation, worksite evaluation, they can only see the results. They can't see, or any other assessments that you enter in there, they could only see the results. They can't actually edit any of these that are like staff-assisted assessments. So, all right, well, that's all I have for today. Are there any other questions?
There is something that I wanted to point out. If you've got other questions, go ahead and feel free to ask them while I point this out. But I wanted to make sure that I let you know that it's kind of encouraging. The governor today gave his annual budget address and released his proposed budget. One of the constitutional requirements for the governor is to annually release a proposed budget. And so the good news is that the Community Youth Employment Program was included in the proposed budget, which is a very good thing. It certainly doesn't guarantee necessarily any stability, but one of the reasons that we haven't been able to start the Community Youth Employment Program at the beginning of the fiscal year has been the fact that it is not included in the governor's proposed budget. So the Youth Employment Program is a DHS grant, and we fall under the executive branch. Ultimately, at the top of that chain is the governor, and until his office actually allows us to spend the money to operate the program, we can't do that. So we can't put the grant funds out there and operate the program. So last year we had an appropriation from the legislature, which is also a requirement for being able to operate the program. We had a budget from the legislature, but we did not have the permission from the governor through his proposed budget. This year, in the budget that was just released today at noon, so it's only 2 hours old here, they did go ahead and include in that budget the Youth Employment Program. That's encouraging because it increases the likelihood that that we'll be able to actually operate the Community Youth Employment Program as of the beginning of the fiscal year, should the legislature decide to go ahead and appropriate funds for youth employment. And I think there's good reason to believe that they will, because they have done so in the past fairly consistently. So I think I'm encouraged to see that it's likely that we're going to have that opportunity again. So hopefully the goal is not to have a gap in services like we've had over the past couple of years, with the program starting late in the year, and then we're only able to operate an 8-month program instead of what should be a continuous 12-month program. I'm going to go ahead and paste a link here on the left side of the screen in the chat window here. This is a link to the governor's proposed budget. So this is public information. It's out there on the web. You're free to Google it if you want to, but this will link to, it's kind of a large PDF version of the budget. There are other versions that are out there, but this is the PDF version of the budget. And I've linked you to page 296, which involves some youth employment grants here. And if you want to take a look, the Youth Employment Program is kind of the last grant there that's in that first list on page 296 of this over 550-page budget. I do want you to see something that is a little bit, sometimes people have questions about what this means exactly and what to make out of these numbers, but the General Assembly appropriated $15 million for the Youth Employment Program in FY18, which is the fiscal year that we're in right now. But the governor only has allowed us to spend $11,578,000. So you can see that in the governor's proposed budget, he has actually proposed level funding for us for the next fiscal year. So that's encouraging. It basically means that, if the General Assembly were to appropriate the same amount of funding, that we should be able to operate this program with level funding going into fiscal year 2019. One other thing to note is the amount of funding that we awarded in fiscal year 18 was actually less than even the $11 million. And the reason is the $11.7 or $8 million that we were allowed to spend, we didn't want to award all of that money on an 8-month period because that money was designed for 12 months. And so if we gave it all out to operate for 8 months, when we actually got a 12-month program as we were anticipating, we wouldn't have enough money to operate all the programs. We wouldn't have enough money to fund all of our providers. So we actually have spent less money than we need now because our anticipation is that in the future, hopefully, we'll have a 12-month grant and we could increase everyone's budgets that they've got this year by what would essentially be by 50% because you would be increasing from 8 months to 12 months. And so we kind of wanted to make you aware of how those funds, how we consider those numbers when we look at things. But in general, it's good news, okay? So I'll leave it at that.
Sure, good deal. All right, hey, if you haven't already checked in, then go ahead and do so. And other than that, that's all that we have for today. Again, if you have any questions, you can always email them to info@lmiworknet.com.
And as always, too, we thank you for your patience as we work through things. If errors or bugs come up, please work with us. We will get these things worked out. This is always a process, and I constantly feel like we can only improve. We can only get better. And so I feel like we've already, for FY18, made a number of improvements. Once a lot of this gets done, if we are able to get started in FY19 come July 1, and we've got the WorkNet where we've tweaked it and gotten it to work well and gotten it to do the things that DHS needs it to do, I really think it's going to be a fine program and a fine system. And so appreciate you. You guys are kind of helping us this year to develop things into a way that's hopefully going to have long-term sustainability. So best wishes. Have a happy Valentine's Day. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.